Welcome to Wildrose Country. This is a short series of videos that I've made to focus on the history of our region in Red Deer and a little bit of the surrounding area. We're starting in the year 1670, and in the final episode, we're hitting the year 1905. That's the year when Alberta, and by extension Red Deer, joined the Dominion of Canada. Let's start with the obvious question. What was this place in 1670? If we look at the local land treaties, we know that Red Deer comes under the jurisdiction of Treaty 6 and 7, which means that just prior to European colonialism in the region, the land was used by a number of indigenous people. Members of the Blackfoot, Tsuut'ina, Stoney Nakoda, Cree, and Saulteaux cultures visited this area to camp, hunt, trade, and socialize. This was prairie and woodland at a time before commercial agriculture. Countless species of prairie grasses and wool grew along the rolling hills and flat stretches of this part of the world, with some just inches high and others as high as 6 feet. The non-human creatures of the countryside, like rabbits, weasels, cougars, coyotes, wolves, and deer, could be completely hidden in the grasslands during the summer months. Larger animals like moose, elk, and bison, however, found it more difficult to hide, and these became common prey for Alberta's first people. Of all the animals that inhabited the land, none were more significant to indigenous cultures than the buffalo, or bison. These massive creatures provided food, clothing, shelter, and tools. Bison hunts were therefore a crucial part of life, and indigenous groups developed sophisticated techniques for hunting them, including the use of natural land formations like buffalo jumps. These are steep cliffs where herds were strategically driven over the edge. The remains of one such site, Head Smashed In Buffalo Jump, located south of Red Deer, is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Near today's Rotary Park, there's an archaeological site called Piper Mountain. Over the last 1,500 years or so, nomadic hunters camped on the top of this hill. They carried portions of their bison kills to the top where they prepared them further, cooking and eating some of the meat and turning the rest into pemmican. In every video segment of this series, I'm going to try to recreate some kind of contemporary recipe. And in this case, I've gone with pemmican. A little note about pemmican, though its first documentation was in the mid-18th century, it's well known to have been eaten for at least hundreds of years before that in North America. In fact, it might have come over straight from the Bering Land Bridge. This is a mixture of animal fat, very dry meat, and potentially some dried fruit. So berries, bison fat. That would have been a common way to put this together. So we take the dried meat and pound it into as fine a powder as we can, then add dried berries and do the same. Finally, we add about the same measure of fat as meat and mix it up into a sticky dough. Make a nice little cake out of that and set it somewhere cool to set up. Quick side note, this is completely fake pemmican made out of dried roasted soybeans, blueberries, and vegetable oil. No animals were harmed in the making of this segment. Pemmican is extremely calorie-rich and easy to keep from spoiling throughout the winter, so this makes it a really ideal food source. Mortars, pestles, and grinding stones like these, displayed at the Red Deer Museum and Art Gallery, were indispensable in Indigenous Albertan cultures, serving multifaceted roles in food preparation and material processing. In fact, similar artifacts are found in the archaeological record of cultures like the Mexican Maya, Peruvian Inca, and Persian Sumerians. People have been grinding corn, grain, and minerals this way for thousands of years. Neither domestic cats nor plant-based pemmican residue existed in the 1670s Elk River area, but they do now, and seem to have a great relationship. Pemmican. Let's try. So, for meat, I took a veggie burger, and I got it really dry in the oven. Same with some blueberries. And then I pummeled it till it was sand. And then I added the fat, made the patty, and then put it in the refrigerator. And here's what we have.
Wait for it to harden. There
Wait
you go.
for it to harden. As I pushed my way awkwardly through a section of local woods and understood why it had taken my most intrepid ancestors nearly 200 years to make their way this far from the St. Lawrence Seaway, I started to wonder about something else that has been on my mind for a long time. Let's talk about the name of Red Deer, because it was confusing to me for a really long time. I used to think that this community was named for the fact that there were a lot of red deer here, which is obviously confusing to anybody who grows up around this area because we have white-tailed deer, not red deer. So I thought probably somebody ate them all. That's not actually the case. What happened is the river got its Cree name, which is Waskasoo Sipi. And when Europeans came and were learning how to talk to the Indigenous people here, a lot of translations didn't quite work out the way they should have. So what the Cree called Elk River, the Europeans turned into Red Deer River. And then the community became Red Deer. So technically speaking, this is Elk River and the elk community. Daily life in 1670 was deeply connected to the land. The seasons dictated movement, activities, and survival strategies. In the warmer months, Indigenous groups gathered near rivers and lakes to fish, collect berries, and prepare food for harsh winters. They built portable homes, like teepees, made from wooden poles and bison hides, allowing them to move as needed. During winter, groups camped in more sheltered areas, relying on stored food and expertly crafted winter clothing made from animal hides. Storytelling played a crucial role in passing down history, knowledge, and tradition, especially during the long, dark winter months. Many stories from the Blackfoot people featured the human embodiment of their creator god, a man called Napi. Napi stories are like fables in that they help to explain the ways of the world.
Napi ki siku kienes. Napi wa annajaukishk, sakyukta pawa akaisk, idots donatonoxikistikuishk.
One time Napi was walking about when a great storm came up. The strong wind began to blow him all over the place. He grasped at the branches of trees and bushes as he went by, but they all broke off in his hand. Finally, he clutched at a birch tree. The flexible birch bent, but did not break, and Nappy was able to stop. When the storm died down, Nappy climbed out of the tree and began beating it with a stick. "Why did you stop me? I was having such fun being blown about by the big wind." The marks left by the beating are still visible on the striped bark of the birch tree. Seeking to expand England's influence in the lucrative North American fur trade, King Charles II granted a royal charter to his cousin, Prince Rupert, and a group of investors, giving them exclusive trading rights over the vast Hudson's Bay drainage basin, which was fittingly called Rupert's Land. This charter not only provided the HBC with a monopoly over the region's fur trade, but also granted the company governance powers over the territory. Under Charles's reign, the Hudson's Bay Company laid the foundation for what would become one of the most powerful trading enterprises in North America.
By 1670, the French had already been trading in the east of Canada for about 150 years, and they had an entire region of what is now Quebec and Ontario called New France. Indigenous had already been trading with each other because there were so many different kinds of people who came here to fish, hunt, camp, and just socialize. They now found out that there were people in the East who wanted specific things and were willing to give more diverse goods in exchange for them. Specifically, pelts. We know it's called the fur trade, and that's for a reason. Europeans wanted bear pelts and they wanted beaver pelts. They wanted other things too, but these were the big hitters. And especially, it came down to beaver pelts. The British used the bear hides actually in their military. You know the beef eaters who will give you a tour at the Tower of London with their big tall hats? Those are bear hides, and they came from here. The French are the ones who really got into the beaver pelts. What confused the people living here was that the French wanted to trade for their used, beat up beaver pelts that they'd been wearing for a year already, that had been soaking up sweat and been rubbed off. The reason for that was the fact that the wear and tear on the beaver pelt exposed the under fur, which was soft and thick. And so the furriers in Europe actually preferred to work with that. It was more pliable and richer. And as I think you know, those were turned into fancy top hats. And this was a huge fashion trend for literally 200 years. So, as the French and English will do, or would do in any case, the settlers in the east of Canada set up trading companies throughout the West, had yet to reach here, but they were still in competition. It was in 1663 that the French King Louis XVI took a branch of his West India Company and sent it into Canada to push further and further west to find all kinds of things and people to collect and bring home and sell. Obviously, a lot of that was fur. What they gave to the people here in exchange was a lot of copper pots and iron. It was actually kind of the Iron Age for the Aboriginals in Canada. Thank you. This is Waskasoo Park in Red Deer. This is where we assume lots of people of different nations, including the Cree and the Blackfoot, came from across Turtle Island, which is all of North America, to trade goods and stories and share news and just maybe even travel. It was thousands of kilometers to get from the east coast of Canada over here, let alone the west coast of Canada. So it took literal centuries for Europeans to actually get to this point. But their presence was felt because every time a new group of French or English traders came into what is now Ontario and Quebec, they sent more groups out, scouts usually, and these involved often French people who were called voyageurs or courriers de pied, and their job was to establish contact with the people out here and just see what sort of stuff they had.
The fur trade was quite literally about fur. That's where the money was coming from. It was these little tools for hunting, cooking, sewing, and building that actually kept people alive during their time in Canada. Look at this pottery preserved at the Red Deer Museum and Art Gallery. You can see the little fine designs on it, as if it was decorated with a little length of rope when the clay was still tacky.
The French voyageurs and courriers de pied were honestly better communicators than the English were at first. They had a better relationship with the native people that they met across the land, and that included here, which is why most Métis actually trace their heritage back to French settlers. Later on, when the French and the English started battling each other in Canada instead of just at home in Europe, they both had the help of certain groups of Indigenous people. The English had a harder time finding people to get on their side, but when they started trading weaponry, things got a lot more interesting.
Hey, thanks for watching. Next time on Wildrose Country, a lone European finally makes it all the way to Waskasoo Sipi and draws himself a cute little map. What will happen next? I'd like to acknowledge Richard Mean, the creator of the intro music to this series, as well as the local fiber artist Vicky Sullivan, whose beautiful bear artwork you saw during this episode. You can see this and much more at the Red Deer Museum and Art Gallery.